welcome today. Today is our first panel of If I Would Have Known What I Know Now during real estate transactions. So whether it be with sellers, buyers, we have commercial with Janet Faulkner here, whether it's new construction, what do you wish that you would have known that you learned, I guess, during the transaction that could have saved the transaction or made things easier or better and more achievable? So we have our panelists today. I'll let the ladies introduce themselves, and we're just going to talk round robin style for the next hour, and we hope that you enjoy. So Janet, why don't you go first?
Okay, thanks for having me on the panel, by the way, Jamie. For those that don't know me, I'm Janet Faulkner with Faulkner Commercial Group. I was thinking about, in knowing that we were going to do this, I was thinking this morning about what do I wish that I had known when I started? And one of the things that popped into my head was you don't want every listing. And I know that that probably sounds really strange, but there were listings early on that I took that either something was off, either it wasn't a fit with the seller, they really weren't motivated. They said they were motivated, but they kind of weren't motivated, or they were a little bit of a bully. And I'm like, oh, I can deal with this. I can handle this. And in hindsight, I would pass. So you don't want every listing. You want to focus your attention on the people that you can help that are actually motivated, that do actually want to sell, people that are reasonable. And so that would be my first piece of advice. Don't take every listing. And also I would say don't work with every buyer.
Right.
So anyhow. Okay, so I'm gonna let someone else jump in.
Heidi, yeah, no, this is a great one. So right away, she's like coming in hot, like, oh, don't work with everybody. You have the choice to say no. Don't chase the commission.
Well, that's the
know what's
blessing
right
of
for
this
your
business,
personality.
right?
Yeah.
You get to decide who you work with. So
I love it. All right, Heidi.
Yeah, so I'm Heidi Giesler. I'm licensed in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And I started in 2008. And what Janet just said gave me a memory. Doesn't it? Oh my God. I so wanted this listing in Cambridge. At that time, it was probably 2012 or something. Over $1 million was a big deal, and I wanted that listing, but the energy was so bad. A divorced couple, she was in denial and he was not around, and I had to clean up the whole house and stage, and I did so much work. You know, I would never do that again. I could have sold 10 houses with that energy and in that time. And you know, the bad energy sticks with you and makes everything else bad.
Right.
You know what you think about
what you attract
is what you attract.
Exactly.
So don't take those.
Great job, Janet, for starting us off on this momentum.
And I was thinking when I start off with that, Jamie's gonna kill me.
No.
Of course you want
Yeah.
listings, but you want listings that you can sell, and you don't want to be busy. You want to be productive.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
I love
I
it.
bet you have
Robin.
that too, right, Robin?
Yeah, I'm Robin Renahan, also licensed in Mass and New Hampshire, and being on this panel made me think about a New Hampshire story. And my main point today is going to be ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. Go 3 deep, like they always tell us to do, which I thought I was doing, but I had a friend who said, oh, my son wants to buy a house in New Hampshire. He wants a lot of land. Great. Okay. So we go off to Deerfield, 40 minutes each way. You know, I found him several houses that were exactly what he wanted. And he liked them all, and he finally decided to make an offer on one. But wait, oh, we just need to do a second showing, where he brings his father along. And his father walked in and was like, no, Deerfield's too far. You know, this is too far. What are you thinking? What are you doing? And you have to know, is there another decision maker here? You know, I thought I had asked enough questions, but I must not have asked that question, because after that, we started looking closer, and it turned out his father was steering the whole thing from behind the scenes, but wouldn't come to the console, or, I wasn't able to engage with the person who was actually really making the decision. So I wasted so much time with these people. And in the end, the father had him work with his aunt who's also a Keller Williams real estate agent, which I knew, but I never really asked, well, why are you working with your aunt? You know, I figured there might be like a weird family situation. So sometimes I just don't ask because I don't want to be like, it seems a little intrusive to ask certain questions, but I say ask them.
Right. I mean, the
And
question,
That's a really good point.
the question
Yeah.
thing to go back to with what you said, not working with everybody. If you don't ask the question, you're making the assumption. And so when we start assuming for our clients, and we're making this assumption, you get all the way to the point of driving out to Deerfield, and that's so far.
More than once.
And, yeah,
not
more
just
than once to find out that maybe he was making the financial decision, or maybe not. Maybe it was still a pride thing, maybe it was a parent backing thing, but I wish I would have known that before, because then I would have had him A, come to the showings, or B, asked him questions about where do you see your son living? What do you see this looking like, to include him if that was important to the client. Although sometimes you don't want to dig too deep, like you said, because I just want to know what they want to share. I don't,
Yeah,
you know.
it feels intrusive sometimes to ask certain personal questions, but you really need to speak with all the decision makers.
Yeah.
You
No, that's a
need to
good
hear
one,
from
speak
them
with the
all.
decision makers. Janet,
So can I, could you see I was like.
I saw it.
So,
Yeah,
so is it okay if I ask you a question on that? So when you were,
Yes.
when you were doing that with him, was there any, like, were you hearing that little question in your head?
Yeah.
About, I wonder who the decision, so, because I have found that too, that, that I have learned over the years that when there's something pops in your head, like as a nagging question about, you know, the old like, oh, should it be disclosed, or should you ask this question, right? So were you thinking those questions, but you didn't?
Yeah, especially the one about the family member in the business, but, you know, it seemed too personal to ask the mother who had referred me the son.
like, are we gonna be
Don't
giving
you
a
like your
referral
sister-in-law?
fee?
Like, why aren't you giving this to your sister-in-law? You know, it just seemed a little,
Yeah,
like, if she wanted to do that, she clearly would have done that.
yeah,
But
that-
in the end, don't you wish you would have asked that question?
right.
And saved yourself a lot of time?
I mean, how many times have the three of you ladies has a client come on to, like, has come to you, and then you work with them, and then they turn around and say, oh, my aunt, uncle, my Tom, Dick, Harry, this one is not just the attorney, so we'll talk about that after, but is a real estate agent in Wisconsin, and she's talking about something called a referral fee, and they don't even know what they're saying, but they know that whoever was in the family is now coming in like a Monday morning quarterback, and is like, I want a 25% referral fee. So how many of you have had that? What's your experience with it? Janet, do you have that? I know Heidi's laughing, so she definitely has it.
I have a new story, yes.
I have had that, and I've had where so somebody calls and they inquire about a property, and then I've had one of our buyer agents go set it up, go show the property, and the person shows up with an agent.
Mm.
And now all of a sudden so now that, actually, it's not really a referral fee, but now there's a buyer agent there. So that's kind of a totally different question, but that's what we ran into. I always ask the referral, like,
Yeah.
you know, but we did, in that situation, we did pay that agent, and I gave our agent something for showing it.
Right. Because, I mean, we can, and I want to hear Heidi too, but we can get in a whole conversation about what the current cost really is, which that's
Yeah.
not this panel today. Because I know that people who are gonna be watching it probably have that question. Frank, I love you. I know that you have that question, like, exactly where would that current
Well, I'm
cost
saying
come
if
from?
if you're, you know, working to close a deal with
Yeah.
a client, if they come to you, and the first question I'm gonna ask now is, how did you find me?
Yeah, exactly. Again, go back to asking all these questions. Who
Yeah.
referred you? How did you find me? Do you have any family members in real estate? Do you have an attorney in the family? Do you have this? I would ask those questions, just even if they're not using them, just to know, to be able to pull back from that,
Yeah.
you know, spidey
And-
sense that you talked about.
But in that spidey sense, I love that, but as far as in that situation with the
Yeah.
referral fee, I would just say no.
Right. So.
And that's not being
Mhm.
cheap, that's
Mhm.
just like, you know, no, but with the, because we have to negotiate for our own fees, right? So we have to protect our value and our fees. However, like on the buyer agency side, of course, they have the right to, they should have representation if they want it.
Mhm.
We always choose to to err on the side of paying.
Listing side is
Yeah.
different than
Yeah.
buyer side, so
Right.
that's what I hear you saying. Listing side, asking, after you have the listing and asking, saying that somebody wants a referral, I get that. On the buyer side.
Right.
On the buyer side, there is a little bit of, have they shown you any homes? How involved have they been? When did you stop working with them? Why did you reach out to Heidi, which we're gonna get to, because I know that she has a story about something like this.
Yeah.
And you wanna be able to have that answer beforehand,
Yeah.
because it is true that at some point, an aunt and uncle will come into the transaction and they might turn around and say, you know what? But if you would have had the exclusive buyer contract signed, that's a different story. And so again,
Right.
today we're gonna just kind of talk about a lot of stuff in terms of just a bunch of things of if I would have known. But if you want to learn about how not to have that problem and have an exclusive contract signed, then we talk about that.
Right.
But that's really where it comes into play. If we really didn't get it signed, because that's your fallback. If we had it signed, it doesn't matter. I know
Right.
that your Aunt Susie, now honestly, it's an integrity conversation. And it's per the agent, not the company. So Heidi, you've obviously experienced this, so tell us your story
Well,
about
yeah.
referral fees or lack of.
Yeah,
What
so
it looks
this
like.
one, it just happened. I was supposed to bring a listing on the market this week. This week. And it's a BNI member in my group
Okay.
that we are referring to. I referred a lot of business to this BNI member. And she told me that they have a friend agent, but she gave her everything else, and this one is gonna come to me.
Mhm.
And it was a home on an acre and a half and another acre and a half lot.
Mhm.
So, and because of weird situation, the home had a life estate on it. The land was in the mother's trust,
Mhm.
and they needed to clean that up. And so I could really not sign a listing agreement either, because they needed to clean up the ownership.
Mhm.
But I put in so much research, so much work, went to the town, found that the lot is not buildable. There's a paper road, but because of the paper road, they weren't adjacent.
Mhm.
And even though the road doesn't exist, but there is a plan filed
Right.
with the registry, so it is, they are not contiguous lots.
Right.
And I gave them all the information, everything that I found. And then last week, she always asked me, when can you put up the sign? When can you put up the sign? I ordered the sign, coming soon to be put up. Last Wednesday, I went to take pictures so I could tell Nick where
to put
exactly
the
to
sign.
put the two signs.
Yep.
Because he didn't have street frontage. And they stopped the guy and don't put up the sign. The husband stops the guy, don't put up the sign, paid them whatever Nick needed to be paid.
Yep.
And I found it very odd. And then she told me her husband has to think about, he may not want to sell. And they needed to think about it over the weekend. And Tuesday morning, I get an email that they're going with their friend. Thank you very much. And I didn't, normally I sign a listing sooner, but I would trust the BNI member.
Yes.
And then with their situation, they needed, and I did talk to attorneys and research and helping them. I even had a staging consultation, walk them through everything they needed to do in the home.
Mhm.
This has been going on for a couple months.
So let's talk about that, because that's another one, if I
Yeah.
would have known, right? Trust and working with friends and family.
Exactly.
So friends and family are friends and family outside of the business arena, but business is business. And we get caught up on sometimes trying to help with the integrity of our personalities and people, that if my girlfriend, my neighbor, my cousin is asking me questions about the property, know that we're in real estate, we're gonna be putting it on, we're excited, and you're talking as if you're gonna be the person. You know what? Yeah, I can totally have my stager come in and give you some ideas. This will be great. And you get through that process. And then it's the worst thing ever to hear, oh, okay. And then you'll either see it on MLS, that happens. You see it for a listing sale sign at your neighbor, and you're like, I thought we just talked about that at book club. And then go with somebody else. So if that's happened to you, how have you dealt with it? Or if it hasn't, how would you deal with something like that? Because that happens obviously all the time here in the office and
in every real estate office.
Yeah, well, the trust thing,
Yeah.
obviously, you can't even trust the people you think you can.
Mhm.
And,
And with that note,
Trust
we like to trust people, we do have integrity, however.
and, and the reason I didn't do
Yeah.
the listing like I always do before I
Yes.
start work, always, I broke my own rule, but this situation was so different.
Yes,
And I was always wondering, why isn't she cleaning up the title first?
yes.
Why she shouldn't even work on the house, she should do that first.
Mhm.
And anyway, that's how it went. And so Tuesday morning, I see the email and I'm like, wow, that was a punch in the stomach.
Mm.
And instead of focusing on how bad I felt,
Mhm.
I said, well, then let me work on the next listing
Right,
and do something positive.
right.
And yesterday I started the listing paperwork. So like moving on.
Robin, has this happened?
I mean, we've all had our things where we think we're getting a certain listing and then all of a sudden we don't. Maybe it's a friend, maybe not. But it made me think when you said feeling like you get punched in the stomach, I feel like to be in this business, you have to learn how to deal with that punch in the stomach feeling. And when I
True.
first started, I would feel bad for about a week when
Mm.
something like that would happen. I would really just be in like, oh, be like so miserable. And then the longer I was in the business and the more experienced I got, I started saying, you know what, I'm gonna give myself like 24 hours to just feel however I'm gonna feel about this rejection.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'm just gonna forget it. I'm just gonna move on. And now I have to say, like, it's still hard to do that,
Mhm.
but gotten so much better and about doing that because I don't, in the beginning, I was like, I'm not sure I have the right personality type for this business
Mm.
because it's awful. I'm trying to think of it.
It's like thick-skinned, like you have to have a backbone, and you're an independent contractor. So whether you are this, you own your own landscaping company, you're the owner of your own brand and company. You're powered by Keller Williams, and so there are going to be times where, I have right now a girlfriend who's putting her house in the market and going back and forth, and she's just a friend, and it's listed with an agent. And when she calls me, I just think to myself, this is why I don't want to potentially list homes and work with buyers anymore, because it's so emotional, but B, some of them, they want your expertise as a friend or a family member, but then they want to keep it separate because they want to hire somebody so that there's no emotion, but they want to use you as the quote punching bag to be like, but what if, all this stuff here,
But
so it goes
again-
back to you saying right at the beginning, Janet, it's okay to say no to those people that you feel like you don't want to say no with working with, for whatever the reason
Right,
is. If you have that gut feeling, and don't run because of the commission, say, you know what, it's just not a good fit, but I think maybe Heidi might be a good fit based on your needs, and refer it or something like that.
But also
Yeah.
goes back to questions,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes we're assuming that in your case, you had a good reason to think you were getting listened to or told
She
you
told
were.
me to.
But there's
Yeah.
other
Good reason.
times when we do sort of make assumptions based on the way people are treating us and based on the fact that they're having us over and we've just given them a CMA and, you're taking steps. But again, it goes back to questions.
Did you
about-
ask for the business?
did you ask? Did you ask if they're considering anyone else? Did you ask if they were ready to sign? Or maybe with a friend? I love this, the Brian Buffini question to qualify people.
Mhm.
You ask them, if you needed a real estate agent or if you had a friend or family member that did, would I be that person? Am I that person? Because sometimes you don't know, but you think you're that person for years with someone and you find out you're actually not because
Mhm.
they have a family member. But it's a hard question to ask. One time I was on vacation with some girlfriends and I had just taken the Buffini course and I thought, and even with my girlfriends that I know, so I'm like, it's an awkward question, but we had a few drinks. I'm like, hey, so you guys, like, if you were gonna move right now, you're like, am I the person you would hire? And I didn't even know. These are my best friends. And they were like, oh yeah. And I think asking the question actually solidified that but it's a hard question to ask, but it's a good one.
I just wrote it down, I think it's a great one.
And if
I
they
think it's a
said
great one.
no, then what?
And then
Right,
yeah.
they'll usually tell you why when they say no.
Yeah.
But if they don't, either way, but at least you know to stop focusing on them.
Yeah,
Don't even
Right.
think of them anymore.
And you know what I've also thought about what just happened? I thought, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe it would have been one of those energy suckers that I would have had to deal with the
Right.
whole time,
Right.
because that's kind of how the preparation went.
Well, look at all the people that were quote in the kitchen on trying to get all the signatures. And then the clearing of the deed and this and that. You already put so much work and effort to figure out how to successfully decide maybe if you wanted to take the listing or not. And even though it was decided potentially by the sellers, I think that I know you well enough. I think that right away you would have known if it would have gone on a little bit longer with you doing stuff like that, you would have nailed it, said we're either hiring, signing, and moving forward with more effort in terms of pulling documents, or this is too deep and too.
Yeah, and the
too
reason
further
I
down.
didn't sign is
And
that
they have dodged a bullet.
exactly.
You-
what she
sometimes we don't know the reason, but, and again, this is as we get older and we're in this business longer, and it's like in life in general, sometimes things work out the way they're meant to work out, and so what would have happened if you got the listing and it turned into a nightmare, maybe because they were unreasonable or because the husband was miserable, whatever the situation, now would that have affected your B&I relationship, like, so sometimes, and they may realize because they dealt with you, that this person maybe is not as knowledgeable, and they may come back to you, or what I see happening is they may be calling, you may get a phone call, what about this, and they'll be asking for your advice, so they wanted to give her the
I
listing.
wouldn't be surprised.
So, and then, the answer is, I can't legally advise you, because I've had that happen with, for one reason or another, and then they still call you, and it's like, I would love to help you, but I can't advise you because I don't represent you.
Yeah.
And that's how you shut that down, because you
But-
chose to hire the wrong person.
I'm just kidding.
And delete from the line, but it's true, it's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go with that easy, like, for example, the husband in Heidi's case turned around and said, you know what, we're actually gonna go with somebody else that maybe
Their
he was
friend.
right. And because of their friend, or because of guilt, or because of maybe wine that they had at a dinner on Saturday night. And they
Yeah.
said that I can sell it, I can promise over deliver.
And I've given them all the advice already.
Correct,
And
correct,
they may have discounted their fee,
correct.
and you don't need to take a discount listing,
So
right?
asking questions, not working with everybody, being in control. I want to move over in terms of the thick skin, because this is going to be another gut wrencher. If I would have known, when we go through, and I want to work backwards with walkthroughs first, and then we're going to go from like closings, purchase and sales and stuff. But with walkthroughs, there seems to be a lot of questions with newer agents and experienced agents of scenarios that when you go through a walkthrough, what have you experienced that you either made an assumption, if you use that word, or something has come up that you wish you would have asked the right question, or whatever it is, so that situation wouldn't have occurred during a walkthrough? And how did we deal with the walkthrough to successfully, hopefully, close the property? So in commercial,
We don't really do, I was
It's
trying
right.
to think, I can't remember when I've done a walk, and I'm on the listing side, so we
Yeah.
don't usually do
Yeah.
walkthrough. We sold a restaurant, a pizza restaurant, they did a walkthrough,
Yeah.
mostly because some stuff was staying, some wasn't, but we don't,
right, but
Yeah.
you don't really, in commercial, it's different. It's more like.
yeah. Oh, we
business.
did do, I had a walkthrough, it was a couple of years ago, we were selling a restaurant, and we got to the walkthrough, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that was left behind. And this was kind of interesting, because the buyers are there with the agent,
Mhm.
and they said, we're not gonna, like, we're not gonna take on, like, all this stuff was here, we're not gonna close. And I said, you guys go to the closing, I knew the agent, I said, you guys go to the closing, I'll take care of this, it'll be done. I said, I will send you the pictures, it'll all be done. And they left, and the agent said, guys, I know her, if she says it'll be done, and when they left, and there was a receipt for 1-800-GUT-JUNK, or whatever that is, right? And I called them up, and they said, okay, well, we can be there at 3:00. And I said, that won't work. We have a closing at 1:00, and this has to be done. This was like 10:00 in the morning. And she's like, oh, well, we have stops before you. And I said, could you check with any of those people? This is time sensitive. Maybe there isn't. See if they would
Switch
switch.
times.
She called me back, she said they're on their way. And actually, I called Brian came over and and I'm not kidding, I will never forget, I was in like a silk blouse and
That's the best.
we got everything, we were like hauling everything out so that the guys came, they worked for hours. I think this is gonna cost, let's say like $2,500, whatever. It was $1,000, got it done, saved the deal. And by the way, those buyers, 2 years later, came back and had me list the property.
So right
Sell it.
there, right,
So
the integrity of the working, you did the right thing,
Yeah,
and you weren't working for the commission. At the beginning, we talked about sometimes when agents walk away from working with somebody, it's because they're so commission driven.
I
that they
never
just
focused
want-
on, never.
You paid out of
ever-
your own pocket and it came back twofold. You saved the transaction,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
your job, and then they came back to you as the agent because you stepped up and did it as the list agent.
Yeah.
Whereas honestly, the buyer agent could have turned around and said, oh man, maybe I should have walked through the night before, or I should have asked questions like Robin said, just ask the question, it
Yeah.
hasn't been done yet. And when it wasn't, maybe they should have stayed back, but you stepped up and did it, so,
Did the seller reimburse you for that? Or did
I
you?
don't remember.
yeah.
I don't remember. Probably not. Like it wasn't a great situation. That, the place had closed, but anyhow, but just got it done. And that brings up another point because that is what people have to always remember. It's about that transaction, that client getting it done, getting it closed. It's never about the commission,
Mhm.
never about the commission.
Heidi or Robin, anything with walkthroughs
I
or questions? Just dying on
I had a
it.
similar situation. It's been quite a while back. I was the listing agent, went to the walkthrough, should have gone maybe the day before.
Let's say that again. If you're the list agent or even a buyer agent, why are we waiting to
I
do it
always
with our
go.
clients?
I
Go
always go the
before.
night before as a
Yeah.
buyer agent. So anyways, everything is fine in the house, everything is removed. But behind the shed was a pile of crap. And the buyer says, I'm not closing. I said, I'll get it done. You go to closing, I'll get it done, I promise. I called Junk King. One phone call and it was done.
And
Yeah.
you were the buyer agent?
I was the seller agent. I didn't even tell the seller. It was too late to ask them, why didn't you
Right.
remove that?
Right,
You
and
know, I
honestly,
just
the integrity.
take care of it.
You're there as the list agent, and if it's not something completely major, it's $500 to $1,000. I mean, sometimes we spend a lot of time on a transaction, and then every now and then we have that magical transaction that we're like, oh my God, if all transactions could be this easy, that would be great, but those are very far in between, like a rainbow. So, but to do that shows the respect of how you work as the agent, and that's why people refer you,
Want to hear a funny
but-
story?
Yes, and then we're gonna go to Robin for
That is
the
ridiculous, what I did.
the walkthroughs.
So the day before, I had a listing and the buyers moved out of town and still had stuff in the garage. So the day before closing, I go to check if the garage is empty. But you know how we get so sidetracked, and I didn't realize my car wasn't in park.
Oh.
And I'm sitting in front of the garage, looking at my phone or something, let go of the brake and go into the garage door.
You smashed into the garage?
Very slowly.
If I would have known to put my car in park before grabbing my phone during
So I
an
wanna give you-
excitable closing.
So it's like, my car had no damage at all, but the garage door had a bow in it. And they were already in Florida, the sellers. So I'm calling the sellers, let them know. First I called the garage place,
Replacing the garage.
ordered the door,
Oh,
and
wow.
paid for it. Then I let the seller know, and because the neighbors will call them.
Yeah,
And I immediately called the buyer and the buyer agent and showed them the receipt. This is being done,
yeah. Yeah.
when closing happened the next day. Yeah, but it was a little costly.
Put your car in park. Put your car in park.
So that's fun, that's awful. That's it.
Yeah, but you fix the problem, and honestly, and then I wanna get to Robin too about walkthroughs. You could have handled it in so many different ways. I could have just called up the buyer agent too and said, hey, listen, I wanna let you know, I totally didn't put my car in park, it went through the garage door.
I did.
I got a garage company to come out, it's gonna cost between this and this, I can either give that towards credit and your buyer can go pick out whatever door and upgrade whatever door, or I'll just get it fixed before. So as
Yeah.
long as you're handling the as long as you're
Absolutely,
communicating
yeah.
and handling it, that's is the difference of them.
Well, it had to match the other door.
Or then you could buy two. Robin, what about the crazy walkthrough story, or like if you would have known something?
I had a seller one time who was going through a divorce and she was an older woman, and so I called the day the closing, yeah, it was the next morning, and I called her at like 3, 4 o'clock, and I was like, how's it going? You know, you all moved out? And, you know, she had the movers come and everything, but she was still, she's like, oh my God, it's taking me so long. I totally misjudged how long everything was gonna take. And she was clearly distraught. So I'm like, oh, I'll come over and, you know, help you out, see what's going on. So I go over there and her car was completely full and she was just like spent, done, like so stressed out. So I'm like, you know what, why don't you just take your car and go? I had to clean out her entire refrigerator. And I put everything in my car. Like I don't even know if I had bags or what I did. So I took the whole contents of her refrigerator and took it home. And we don't have the easiest trash situation in Merrimack. Like we have to like buy these blue bags and like do all this stuff. And it's just it's not great. So I'm really not looking for extra trash to dispose of. But anyway, I came home with a whole car full of condiments and all kinds of foods and everything, wiped out her fridge, and you know, it was fine. But it was so emotional. Like I was so happy to do it just because, you know, it's just, that's kind of what we're doing. Like we're just helping people out and taking things off their plate sometimes when they just can't do it, you know?
And we
it was-
forget when you sell a house, like we forget, like we're selling houses on the business aspect of writing offers and stuff. But when you're cleaning out cabinets and cleaning out this and it's very overwhelming. I mean, I must say, I spent a week this last week just cleaning this room that we have above the garage to make it more of an apartment style for my cousins to sleep there this summer. And it took me a week and a half with all the Legos and this, that, and I thought I'd like one day I'll get this all done. And it doesn't happen like that. So hearing with what you guys have said, I would assume that now you have learned to set expectations for your sellers, maybe the week of closing, and to check in on them, maybe make a phone call. How are we with the progress? You know, are we
Yeah.
almost cleaned out? Can I
reminding
stop
them that
by?
they can't just leave like paint and, well, that usually comes
Yeah.
earlier, but
Yeah.
you know, there's sometimes they don't even know what they can and can't leave, and they,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm just gonna leave all this garage full of paint.
Yeah.
And that's,
Well, they like to leave it for the buyers.
yeah,
The buyers might
They
want all of these paint colors,
Red
they might
paint.
want this, right? And so managing
Always
the
ask.
expectations of your clients, right? All right, so I was thinking another one is, either negotiations, purchase and sales. Is there something in the industry so far with your experience that you've learned? And it's gonna probably always go back to asking great questions. I just want to say, as we
Yeah.
started that off, working with the right people and asking questions. But what else do you wish that you would have known or known to look for in a purchase and sale or on an offer form or contingency language? Like, what do you wish that, oh, that could have been the game changer or saved me, or that you've implemented in your business and now you do it all the time because of something that you learned when it came to negotiations, purchase and sales contracts?
I'm gonna go first.
Yeah.
Well, one thing when you said contingencies,
Mhm.
I feel like sometimes people really, buyers, sometimes don't know that they actually really do have a home sale contingency, or maybe they think, oh yeah, I can buy even though you know, I can buy before I sell, you know, because they're in they might have really good credit, or they might just feel like they're in a strong financial position, not realizing that they actually can't get a loan, you know, based on, you know. So the reason I say that, any good lender, you're gonna know that, but I was dealing with some buyers who were from New York, and they already had their lender that they were working with. And we had several conversations about, you know, should we be out house shopping? Do they need to sell first? No, we do not need to sell it first. So I said, you know, make sure you know, make sure we have a pre-approval letter, get that done, and then we'll go out looking. So they came. We must have looked at, I don't know how many weekends we were out looking at houses, and we're finally under contract. And anyway, they did get their pre-approval letter. There's no contingency on there. So, which is what I expected. I had no reason to think anything else. And it wasn't until the closing, everything started going haywire. The house they were buying, those sellers almost weren't able to move. And then all of a sudden something started falling apart on my buyer's home in New York. Yeah, but that shouldn't matter. I said, well, that doesn't matter. I mean, you know, since you don't have the home sale contingency. And they're like, but yeah, but our lender said that we have to close on this one first. But that is a home sale contingency.
Right.
So they just didn't understand. And when I called the lender, I'm like, why wasn't that in the letter that it was, that their purchase was predicated upon them
Yes.
first selling this home? He's like, well, we don't put that in here in New York.
I can
And
see
I'm
a
like,
little
Ooh,
black.
this is good.
Interesting.
This is good.
So I was
Good.
just shocked, and the listing agent didn't know about it.
Mhm.
And so now I'm in a position of having to, you know, get more time and telling my buyers that, you know, you could lose your deposit right now, you know, and it
Mhm.
just, it all worked out in the end, but it was one of the more dicey situations.
That's a great one.
And another agent in here that is, I'm friends with, had the same situation where she said that her people were so sure that they did not have a home sale contingency, and they did. And they did lose their deposit, like $40,000. And they
Wow.
said, they didn't blame her, and they said, well, that's on us because we really did not think that we had to sell first. So even though you think you know, sometimes you don't know.
And not every lender will write a letter to say that these funds have been cleared and accepted and committed without the successful transfer of the property located at this location. Only so many lenders will actually do that because they really don't know. So even getting a letter from the lender that even if that language wasn't in there, different states is what I picked up, different states, different lending, different regulations for buying and selling their house when you're working with relocation people.
Yeah.
These are great questions. We live obviously in Massachusetts, but out in the Berks, once a property has an accepted offer, you actually give the accepted offer to the attorney, and the attorney takes it with negotiations through home inspection all the way through. The
Oh.
agent completely stays out of it, including walkthrough, all the way to the end. So the agent's there to list the property, or on the buy side, write the buyer a contract. But once the offer is accepted, the attorneys deal with everything from
Wow.
start to finish, and
Which
the
state?
agent stays out of it. This
No,
is out in the Berks.
I don't think I'd like that, because
You gotta know, you have to know when you're
Yeah.
dealing with
Yeah, I don't
other
like that
properties in other states or areas. You have to ask these great questions. I think that's a fantastic one.
I
So
think,
even
yeah.
the Berkshires, that's Massachusetts still,
Yeah.
so even though it's a
Yes.
different county. it's
Yes.
different.
Yes, this was a live thing. We were purchasing Best Way in North Andover, and the parents were purchasing it for the kids, and the parents lived out there. And they were using, quote, their attorney. I thought too, I asked great questions. Who's your attorney? Looked them up, made sure they were real estate, not just a general attorney, because that becomes an issue. I did everything that I was supposed to, and then all of a sudden, once we got the offer accepted, and I wasn't hearing back about purchase and sale, and like, are we starting it? Like, who's on first? Like, no one. I called the paralegal and I said, hey, listen, we're completely out of contract. No one's getting back to me. And she's like, no, he's working on it. And I'm like, well, why is he working on it? And then she explains it to me, and she's like, he wants to know why you keep emailing. And I'm like, because I have to make sure that the purchase and sale gets signed, that we negotiate any of the home inspection terms. We had a couple of things that we were considering. She's like, it's already done. And I would have never thought that, Frank, because I'm like, Massachusetts, I would assume that it would be the same. Again, back to never make assumptions, don't work with the right people and ask
that
questions.
does often happen
Yeah.
in commercial, but I like to stay. in
Yeah.
that, But that's just kind of control.
So not just with contracts, but maybe let's go to like newer agents. Okay, so newer agents or agents that have been in the industry for a year or two and are maybe frustrated with their activity or how many homes they're selling, or what advice have you learned in terms of slow and steady, or getting out of comfort, degenerating, doing something different, different times. I mean, all of you have experience, you've been through different shifting markets. What advice could you offer that you've learned and picked up from the past that you wish you would have known?
So, okay, so you're looking at me, so I'll go
Jen?
first.
Okay,
Okay.
sure.
So what I see, and I'm not even necessarily with myself, but I think there's a lot of people that are busy, and they're busy, but they're not being productive. And I think so for newer agents, or even agents that have been in for a couple of years, and if they're not making the numbers that they need to make, they're not being honest with themselves about how they're spending their time. But what they're getting, what their return is really what will show if their activities are income
So
generating.
relate it more personable to you, right? So, because you obviously at some point must have saw your business have, ups and downs and dips. Did you realize at some point, like, wow, if I took my foot off the gas here from prospecting or staying in communication with my past clients, my sphere, my marketing, why isn't business showing up 3 months later? Lesson learned. Maybe I
Well, I would
shouldn't
say
do that.
COVID was probably the really good kind of that showed that.
Mhm.
So COVID hit, we were actually in Florida, we came back up here to Massachusetts. And I was working in the yard, and I was getting settled into our newly built house, and I was doing all these things and kind of loving having my foot off the gas, right? And I kind of felt like the best analogy would be, your hamster running on a wheel, right? You're running, and something stops that wheel, or like the kids would like stick a pencil in the wheel and the hamster goes falling off. And I think that happened to a lot of us. But I was like, I kind of like having all this free time, and this is kind of cool. So then you realize, like, all of a sudden there's your things are closing, but there is
The panic
there
sets
isn't-
in.
and you go,
after.
oh, okay, so this is great, but I've got to be able to support a certain lifestyle, so
Yeah.
I've got to, right? So then it was, okay, so what are my lead generating activities? Well, the care calls, right? Was it the bold, maybe? There was that bold that happened, and that's what they were talking about. And we talked to our agents about this. It's like, okay, so everybody needs to like take a break, and you've got other things going on, right, during this time. But now is the perfect time to be making those care calls and reaching out to people and how are you doing? And this isn't a business call. How are you doing? And I don't know. I'm a talker. I love the communication anyhow and talking to people, but I think people are less likely to jump on the phone. That was great for me to spend the time doing that, because I don't spend that blocked time lead generating, and our business has grown just from referrals and
Naturally.
from repeat
Yep.
customers. But I've gone back to I was doing it this morning in the office and making calls to someone, he's a landscaper. We had his listing. He actually just gave his little office listing to someone else. And I was like, okay, that didn't really feel good, and I'd like to keep your listing, but it's like, why? So now I replaced that little listing with, I don't know, 8 more that are much larger, so.
But you learned that the nurturing, we assume, especially in the industry, when agents' business comes from repeat business and referral, they think it's gonna be endless and it will never stop.
Right.
And that's
So
not
you
really
have to
true if
keep in
you're not
touch with those
staying in
people.
touch with
So I
people.
happen to get a notice from about something else, someone else that was a former client who has a bunch of equipment that's being auctioned. And I went, I wonder if this client could use any of that equipment or would be interested. So I picked up the phone and called them. And if I wasn't looking for it, I said, hey, this made me think of you. I don't know if this is the type of equipment that you buy, but would this interest you? Because this is going to happen on July 8th. Yeah, I do. He goes, I'm always interested in that type of thing. Hey, can I call you back in a couple of minutes? Because I'm just in the middle of something. I'm like, oh, yeah, no need. I'll send you the information. And he called me back like 10 minutes later. I kind of didn't expect him to call back, but he called back and we just chatted for like 15 minutes. That's relationship building. He knows that he's top of mind. I'm looking out for him if I see something that he's gonna need. And then in the conversation, what are your plans? Are you gonna be, you looking for anything I can help you with? But that's genuine. That's not like, so, when you hear people talk about lead gen, it's always like, I think robocall. That's not me. I don't.
But I think that's
know.
also, and we're getting a little off track on it, but that's also what's been embedded into certain people. Lead generating is your way of promoting your business. So Robbins could be on the beach, she's
Yeah.
social, she goes with her girlfriends. Maybe she lives in Seabrook, like I don't know
Yeah.
anything, I'm just making this up. But her natural lead generating might be that. I heard Heidi say BNI, so that's lead generating because BNI is
Right.
business, and somebody might pick up the phone call, Jeffrey does, Vulcan 7, Mojo Dialer. Lead generating is your way of how you're going to
Right.
express.
And I think that needs to be discussed more
Mhm.
because I was like it's taken me 10 years to kind of realize, because all the time I'm thinking, well, we're doing a lot of business, but I don't lead generate. And now I go, oh, yeah, I do, because I'm always reaching out to people but it's
Okay,
not.
so let's talk-
So
Yeah.
what, I just said,
Yeah.
so what are your lead or lag? Lag is probably, your lag indicator, probably closings or something like that. But what are the lead indicators that you look at to say, oh, need to put the foot back on the gas, or I'm doing
Looking at the
enough or I'm
pipeline.
not, or.
Look, keeping a pipeline of what you've got coming up to close, right?
To your bank account. I mean, you mentioned COVID. And so I'm gonna actually ask Heidi and Robin the same thing, because COVID, if I would have known, everyone learned something during COVID.
Yeah.
Whether you were an agent that just got in the industry the day before on March 16th, or you've been an experienced agent for 25 years, everyone learned something.
Yeah.
And a lot of us learned that, by the way, you don't have to be at your closings. You don't have to be at this. You don't have to be at that. That business can still happen from afar, remotely, and things like that. So for Janet, in terms of your question, Michael, for lead generating, sometimes it's the bank account, but other times when it's COVID and you're out gardening and doing this and loving life and taking the foot off the gas, at some point when you remember that this is your livelihood and this is what you're supposed to be doing, and the phone's not ringing off the hook. If people stop talking about you, that's when your business dies. And I'll never forget that. Tony DeSella said that. If people are like Jamie who, then you have to pick something in a
Well, I
different
guess, I guess
industry.
what I'm asking is, do you focus more on number of appointments that you got set, or number of leads that you developed or that came in, or like, what is the thing where you say, okay, I'm on track to maintain instead of having the yo-yo?
It's gonna be, I would say, listing contracts and buyer contracts.
Okay, so
It's-
contracts
it's-
on.
Yeah. Because
And that's commercial related, because
Right,
I
right.
I
Oh,
don't
yeah,
track,
this is the
I
question
don't
for
Yeah,
track
yeah.
appointments. I don't do that. I've sold several properties lately that I've not been in or was in once, and sellers that I've never met in person. I've got a guy, I've worked with him for 4 years, and I talked to him the other day and like, we've never actually met in person. And he laughed and he goes, really? And I'm like, no. So when are we gonna meet, have coffee? He goes,
So let's hear from residential, because maybe hopefully whoever's watching the recording, they can turn around and say, wow, if I would have known that in commercial.
well, then
that
bring
you
them.
could-
because
Exactly,
we
that
have-
you, it's
yeah,
more
because
like this, because
yeah.
it's done very differently. Now, residential over here for both Heidi and Robin, so take a couple minutes, Heidi and then Robin, talk to us about Michael's question in terms of like lead generating or COVID, or when did you realize you had to change something about business, or maybe a habit that you picked up that you're like, oh, if I would have known that if I just did this, then this would result to this, whatever that is.
Well, as you know, I go In and out sometimes.
I love Heidi's business, everybody. I love when she comes in and says to me, I'm going on vacation next week and 5 listings just came onto my hands and I don't know, and I have 5 buyers that want to buy the listings.
I went away for a week, in
I
March,
remember.
when was it? May,
Uh-huh.
my birthday week, I went away. And I got so busy before.
Such a
Which always
bad thing.
happens.
So
Right,
lead
it always happens.
indicator,
I mean,
how
like,
many vacations?
I
am I
had,
going
a-
on?
I had a slower start to the year. I was practicing retirement, I would call it.
Yeah.
When
that's
I
fun.
was just like, the first 3 months, it just wasn't motivated.
Mhm.
So I would joke around, I'm practicing retirement, I like it.
I like it.
But anyway, so then I looked at, I gotta fill the pipeline. And I had I do a monthly call with somebody, not real estate related, but it's also about producing a better year.
Okay.
And he said, well, then you want to just make sure, that was in May, I think right before I went away on vacation, you need to put 5 more deals into June. I had 1 closing scheduled. I said, that's a bit rich.
Mhm. Aggressive.
That's a little aggressive, but I put 4 in for June 30,
That's
just
amazing.
made it. But
That's
so,
awesome.
so, and I've been picking it up and I've been more motivated again. I got a listing from a seller, a buyer. And I made sure that they didn't have to sell before they could buy. So I listed a townhouse in Chelmsford, sent a mailer because it was an off-market listing at first. I got a call, I want to sell my house. If you really can get this, I want to sell my house. So I listed that house.
Let's get this first, then we're coming to your house.
Yeah. So I listed that and put it on before Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
So all weekend I'm checking my phone and following up and Monday morning, under agreement, 20,000 over asking.
Yeah, that's great.
And that was a complex. The last sale in there was last year for 335.
Mhm.
And I priced it 379.9. And everybody that came to the open house, almost everybody that I followed up with said it's too expensive, too small, too this, too that. And the first one I sold over asking for 385.
Wow.
And then I listed the second one the same price and over asking at 400. And so now I've raised the lid there.
Yeah.
And I based it on the other pricing of other complexes and checked how much they went up and
Mhm.
it felt good to me.
That's awesome.
And now I'm just doing a postcard. I'm stepping it up into the complex.
Right, but
because
that
I'm
could be
still getting
something for
calls
you.
for buyers.
Right, right.
And why wouldn't they want to list with me if they want to sell? Because a lot of people in there kind of want to sell.
So Robin, obviously experienced same question with COVID or knowing something different or even something about your business with lead gen, what's worked and what should you be doing sooner in the
So
business?
as far as indicators, I'm always looking at my pipeline in my database, which I'm proud to say I finally do have an up-to-date database after doing 2 years and nothing like that. So, so I'm always looking at that, and I mean, it used to be on a whiteboard, so it was somewhere, but now. it's
All right, well, wait, I want
organized.
to talk about this though in depth because this is like a big learning thing. So how long have you been in the industry?
I've been I'm only gonna count my full-time,
Okay,
which was starting here at Keller Williams, February of 14.
okay, so
7 years.
7 years. I don't know if
So
I'm
7
saying
years.
it
I
right.
have not worked through the down market. I got my
Okay.
license in 03,
Mhm.
worked for Coldwell Banker for like a year, and that's when the market kind of tanked out and
Mhm.
real estate was a hobby. So now it's
Okay.
became a full-time thing in 14.
So what made you start looking and really implementing a pipeline? And has that changed your business?
Well, I always had a pipeline. I always kind of had a list of people that were gonna do something eventually that I would look at. It's just a matter of now it's organized into the database as, a potential. So I'm focusing on that all the time. And the reason I finally did the database was because, again, a plug for Buffini. Theirs is just, their referral maker database to me is just in and out easy. Ours does so much more, so it might be good to have 2 if you can sustain that.
Yep.
But for someone like me who isn't good at, I don't like to sit in technology and spending time with that. I just want a record, what are all the sales I've had, what's coming up, what's at, where are all the addresses? So it's just very basic. So that's up to date now, and so I'm looking at the pipeline. And the pipeline has, it's shrunk a lot. I think because of the market mostly, I have a lot of people who were going to be 2 transactions have decided to stay where they are. Either decided to put the addition on, they've decided to wait. I probably have 5 people like that, and if 3 of those are 2 transactions, that's a big. So where I'm at right now in my business is kind of looking for like, what's the next new thing I want to implement? Like, it's not always, I don't think that, I had a great year last year, and now this year I'm looking at it and I'm like, not looking like last year necessarily, but things have a tendency to come together all at once. So I'm not, too worried, but it's just a matter of, I think you're always sort of reinventing things every so often. You're saying, well, I've been doing this for a long time. It's not working the same as it was. So now what new thing am I going to implement? So that's where I'm at right now.
So do you guys who are participating in the classroom environment have any questions about something specific to our panelists about a personal thing that you're going through that maybe they can help because of the experience of what they know now? That could help you. It could be marketing, lead generating, it could be listings, buyers, staying in real estate or getting out of real estate, because those are both conversations that we have all the time.
I
Yes.
just have one question. You're part of I say part of a team, you have your own kind of business. Heidi and Robin, do you work alone or are you part of a team, or just curious?
I work alone with a transaction coordinator.
Okay, yeah.
I work alone.
With the transaction
No.
coordinator or alone?
I need one.
Yeah.
Hire one, Heidi. Well, wait, so you have a transaction coordinator. So, you now have both experiences. Do you think that a transaction coordinator has helped you grow your business so that it takes time away from doing the paperwork and this stuff to go get more business? And you wish you would have had it sooner than when you got it?
Yeah, and also it helps me sleep at night
I
because
was
Yes.
just going to say.
I'm not a paperwork person, so I'm not a details. I'm not a high C in any way, shape, or form. So all those little details that need to happen, I know something's going to slip through the cracks if I'm in charge of it. So someone with a system needs to take care of it. I don't have good systems.
So having a transaction coordinator is
Life changing.
It is, and I hate that, like, that expression is so overused, but that's the only way that I wouldn't sleep at night if I didn't have a transaction coordinator, because I know Bill used to say that, used to use the term like an over-the-wall salesperson. Like what I love to do is negotiate, and that's what I'm good at, right? So the detail stuff, it's like, write the contract.
Yeah.
Then
Next one.
you need
Yeah.
someone else, and then I'm doing the next deal, and let someone else do that, make sure the deposits get, I want to make sure that it's all done and it's all done correctly, but I don't want to be doing it.
But so just because we have newer agents watching this too, it's the same. I want them to know how to do it start to finish for the first couple transactions. And once you realize what your dollar amount potentially is per hour, and you realize that the $400 to hire the transaction coordinator from your commissions, for them to offset you being able to sleep at night, function properly, get all the details out. It's not that you ladies can't do that. And I'm looking at Heidi because I know that Heidi needs a transaction coordinator, and I know that you can do the details too. But you are all 3 of you are very similar. You are all very list agent, like very no C to say if anybody knows the desk. So it's not that you don't know how to do it, but your time is better spent being able to get it under agreement, negotiate, get the next one, and having someone that is really great at that. And that cost, by the way, that $400 allows you to go get another listing or a under agreement at $500,000, which is a $12,500 commission, versus the nickels and dimes of $400 to offset it to somebody that has organization and
Yeah, we're on
skills
the
and
road all the
systems.
time, so when things are happening all day long and you're
Yeah.
in your car driving around, when are you gonna do all that?
Yeah.
When you get home, I know a really successful agent in the Salem office that says she stays up till 11 o'clock at night every night doing paperwork.
I have a successful agent in this office that closed 71 transactions last year and she does it all on her own. And I don't know how she sleeps at night. And so it's true. And you know, you have to figure out where you're best suited.
Well, and it's all about balance. If, you know, if you, you know, I could put a new roof on my house if I had to. Do I wanna do that? No. You know, you know, last week we had a bunch of landscaping done. And I'm out there, I'm like, I've got my bogs on and I'm like getting ready to go out there and I wanted to do it. And he looked at me, his wife's a realtor, and he said, is this the best use of your time? He said, go make some money so you can pay for this. And I'm like, okay, done. I was kind of looking forward to, you know, doing it and getting out there and getting my hands dirty. And he was like, yeah, go make some calls.
I got a TC with when I had like 4 going at once last year. I was like, I'm not gonna manage this.
It's the best.
And
it's
I
the
got
best money you'll
one,
ever
right?
spend.
But now, like, I don't care if it's one, my own house that's gone under contract, like she's doing it all, because I've got now a systematized approach for my clients. My clients get gifts for her, get her address, and buyer's agents are saying, she kept me informed more than my own side.
Yeah.
I mean,
But you guys learned
And
the
and we hear,
importance of
and we hear that a lot, we hear
leverage.
that a lot too, and I've had attorneys say afterwards to the, I shouldn't even say this, it's being recorded, but I've had buyer attorneys say, was that, like, they were even in buyer, like they never heard from the buyer, they were like, you kind of did this, like, whole thing, I'm like, yeah, whatever, I know, but the transaction coordinator really, really make a huge difference.
I mean, their
And,
job, listen, it's your job too, but they over communicate to the point they should, if it's a great transaction coordinator, they are 2 steps ahead and over communicating at a level that keeps everybody on the same playing field. And so I'm serious, with buyer agents and seller agents, whether you're doing 1 transaction or 5 or 25, if you're not good at that, it's okay to leverage that to somebody that's better at doing that so that you can go put your best potential forward and go do whatever that is. And so I think that I've heard all 3 of you say that that's been, and so far, and Heidi, we're gonna get you there, Heidi.
Well,
That
you know,
you have to do it because, I mean, it's life changing. Robin sleeps at night now.
I sleep, I have systems.
She's better at it.
You are good at
You know,
systems.
I am
You are.
really fast doing
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's why I'm still doing it. I don't mind it too much. Like I got a property under agreement, the one from last weekend. I spent an hour Wednesday and everything is done. Everything is ordered
Yeah, I think
You
it's
know,
just on who you are as a person
and,
how you operate.
communicating.
Yeah.
That for me, communication is so
how many deals do you have going on right now?
Right now I have 6 going on. But
Not
that's what I-
7, Heidi?
I'm working on number 7.
Yeah.
All right,
You know,
so-
it's and I have my lists. I never forget dates.
I forget days all the time.
It's always
So-
sitting on my desk and it's in my calendar.
What is, and I'll give you, ladies, just a minute to think about it, but what's the best things that you've learned or best pieces of advice that you've heard that you've applied to your business or works for you, or that not was a game changer, but we've all had experiences and things have been taught to us, whether we learned them the hard way ourselves or somebody suggested something and you were like, oh, I should have done that. What are a couple of things that you could offer to the viewers about something that has worked for you or the best thing that you've learned, time management, whatever it is? Who would like to go first? Robin? Okay.
I would say 2 things. One is working on yourself. Your business grows to the extent that you do. And if you have to, I learned a lot in both. I mean, taking that as a new agent, I think helped a lot for the like belief in, you know, what you can do. And so working on yourself and like always, I always read books, I always listen to podcasts. I'm like constantly like feeding my brain with positive stuff. So there's that. And then the other thing I think about is a quote I heard, everything works, nothing doesn't. So however you decide to run your business, whatever way you want to do, whatever type of lead generation you're good at, if you just keep doing it, it will work. If you keep doing something, if you keep
Yes.
working every day toward a goal, like if, then you're going to be successful. So if you don't do anything, then you're not. You just have to choose what's right for you, the best way for you, and just keep with it.
That's great. I think that it gets in real estate. It's very distractible and everybody wants to do a little bit of this, and a little bit of that, and a little bit of this, and a little bit of that. No, if that worked for Michael, I want to try that. If it worked for Robin, I'm gonna try that.
Yeah.
And you're 100% right. Do what works best for you. We talked about lead generating earlier with Janet. Janet said, you know, I'm not a component of that type of lead generating. I do lead generating this way, but that works for her. So I can't force her to go do that. So I think that that's fantastic advice. Just do you and do what's comfortable and natural. Then later with self-help and pods and things like that, get out of comfort, try something new to go to that next level. But you can't, I don't think you have permission for yourself to do that if you don't know what you're good at. And
Right.
just stay consistent with that. Heidi.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do what you really are good at, not try everything else. And for me, it's the same as Janet. I like to work with my sphere and with my network. And cold calling is not so much my speed. And another important thing is communication. Like sometimes you get into situations where the deal is going sideways and the other party might be the cause and never communicate what's going on. I always communicate, even if I don't have an answer, I communicate, you know, I'm working on it. This is what's going on. And that has saved a few deals. I've gotten, you know, closing attorneys tell me, if you weren't in this deal, it wouldn't have closed.
Yeah,
So
me too.
I want you to say that again. That is the best, that right there.
Yep.
Communicating, even when something is not going on or you don't have an answer, you communicating that we don't have an answer right now, I'm just letting you know we haven't heard, is the best piece of advice, because people are always at the edge of their seat waiting to hear just where we're at. Like, have we heard, have we not heard? You proactively checking in,
Yeah.
and we call it over communicate. That's really just communicating.
Exactly. And
and
you know,
keeping them in the loop.
for instance, I had a situation where I would check in with another agent and I would get this remark, I'll let you know when I hear something.
That's an
not how
answer
to
too,
do it.
though, Heidi.
That's not how to do it.
too. But it might not be, but it is an answer too. If that agent style is, I will let you know as soon as I hear, then that's the way they communicate. Whereas maybe the style that of being sender and receiver, the way that Heidi would send it would be, I would rather say, it's been 5 hours, we haven't heard anything. I'll check in another few hours, whether or not we've heard something or not. That's just your style of
You want
way.
the other party to know you haven't forgotten.
Yes. All right, Janet.
So a couple of things that I've learned is, first, when I'm having that first conversation, we're deciding, and I'm working with a seller and deciding whether we want to work together. So I ask permission to make sure that I can be honest with them. And that is, as you know, and the conversation would go something like, if we're going to decide to work together, I need to know that I can be honest with you. And the language on how I have that conversation is going to depend on their personality, right?
Mhm.
So, but I let them know that I'm not going to BS them. And do I have permission to tell them with, you know, as long as I'm tactful and as long as I'm kind, tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And they'll say, of course. And I will go further and say, so if I feel like you're being unreasonable, I have your permission to point that out to you. And I would say that with a smile, and they were like, oh, yeah, of course. And oftentimes during the negotiation, I will say, okay, So remember when we first talked and I asked you, do I have permission to be honest with you if I think you're being unreasonable? And they'll go, yeah, okay, well. that's
We're
where
gonna
it's at.
exercise that right now.
So that's where we are. And I have to be really kind
Yeah.
and really careful of how I say that. And that helps us get through those negotiations. They go, okay. The other thing though is setting that I learned, and it took me a while to learn this, set the expectation on communication. Because some people don't want you to over communicate. They just want to, and maybe because I'm not really dealing, because it's commercial and I'm dealing with business people and they're maybe running a business while they're doing this. It's like, how much communication do you want? Do you want to know everything as it goes along, or do you want me to just let you know let's talk about that. What does the right amount of communication look like for you? Because some people say, I want to know every week where we are. And someone else will say, I don't, just get it done and just let me know what I need to know.
Like goes back to Robin, right after you said about picking the right people to work with, asking those questions and pre-qualifying them to understand, do you like text? Do you like calls? Do you like email? Do you like this?
Right, and that's really important because not everybody, I don't want to be called about every detail. Like, do your job. I don't know. Don't give me the right. Like, don't like. Okay, I want you to just get it done. I don't want to know every step along the way.
Yeah,
right?
not everybody works like us. It's not just about us. it's about
So that's really important. And then make those notes somewhere, right? So that if or your coordinator, your transaction coordinator. Okay, this is how this person likes to be dealt with, and this is how they like their information. Don't call them, they want to be texted. So I think that's really important.
I love it. Well, I want to thank you girls, ladies, for today. There was a lot of information and experience. Do you have any other questions that you want to ask anybody? Or I'm going to end the recording just because of time. So I stopped that. But yeah, and now you can speak freely. Because honestly, like, I feel like sometimes people say some of the shareholder meetings, when it's more involved with Susan talking each meeting now, and we'll bring something up, it always stems into an agent coming off of mute to get involved. And those seem to be the best shareholder meetings when everyone, because that's when you have the most people on and giving their expertise. And that's why each month I do want to feature panels, whether it's an If I Would Have Known or best practices or this or that. Because you're right, it's not just about lead generating. It's not just about the top producer. It's not just about this. There could be somebody that never sold a piece of property, but they're really great at explaining like forms and documents or marketing, or it doesn't matter. And just staying in your lane of what you're great at. So I do really appreciate your time. What you guys did.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yes, thank you, ladies. And now Heidi, we're gonna have to get you a transaction person.
So our transaction
Oh my
coordinator is
God.
excellent, and she only charges like, I think she charges like $300.
Very sure.
And she's in Florida, but she does
What's her name?
New Hampshire, Carol Menard. And I think
Oh, I
she,
remember that.
I think,
and I think she works for
I think I
Sadie too.
talked to
Oh, yeah,
her. I think I talked to her once. I was ready to pull the trigger and then things slowed down and I didn't.
I mean, Beth is really great. So the truth, like Beth has Precision Transactions, and then Hannah owns the leverage department. Both of them were agents.
I don't think I've heard of Hannah.
Hannah is awesome. So personalities, right? So Beth Crumine is like more reserved, quiet, but hires the same type of personality people to get the job done in that format. So I like to have her in my back corner. Hannah owns the leverage department. Hannah has more of a team leader personality. So her people are like very quick on like getting back to people and different personalities. She has bilingual. She has a team, I think now of like maybe 19 transaction coordinators under
So
her.
would you only work with one or? you
I
never
don't
know?
know, absolutely not. I do not believe I'm working with one attorney, one lender, one this,
No,
one
no, no,
that.
the transaction coordinator, if she has 19 people, so you never know which one is handling
She
your
just keeps hiring
transaction.
more people if she needs them.
No, so they can only handle so many transactions, all right?
Right,
So
but
it's down to a
Only
science.
they are assigned to a person.
Correct.
Each transaction, not one TC.
You can do, it depends on personality. So you could turn around and say, listen, I want 3 to choose from. I want to work with 3 different ones. So that when I'm working with clients, if I have a firecracker client, I know that I'm gonna have to put them with Janet. If I have this firecracker client, I know that maybe it's a Heidi style. And if I have this, it's you. So you can absolutely do that, or you can work with just one so they get to know your style and how you
Right.
like things. And it's about more the relationship behind the scenes between you and them.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, but it's $400 and it can be less than that. It just depends on how involved and what you want them to do. But if I could hire somebody to go do all this stuff that I don't want to do during the week about smart plans and this and that as a team leader, because my job, just like your job, is to go get deals, is to go get recruits. But I'm so boggled down in smart plans and emails and all this stuff that I'm like, if I could just hire that person for $400, I'd be like, fine. It's finding that person.
Right.
It's harder for me to go find what I need. And then you agents on the
Yeah.
transaction, I can introduce you to 20 people that would be like, I think it's a great fit, and just let them do
You
it.
know, and one other thing I kind of wish we had touched on is
Yeah.
so I have had a couple of assistants, and I think, and I probably need to get another assistant, but when I found that, and I know they talk about this even in like, Papazon, what's it, Wendy
Mhm,
Papazon talks about,
mhm.
like if you're gonna get an EA, make sure that you're freeing yourself up to do more lead generation, or do more work, work on your business. But I found that what I did was I had the transaction coordinator, and then like I had Jason.
Mhm.
And he was the interface with all of my sellers.
Mhm.
Or my landlords
Yep.
that I had, that had like lots of property, and I had people tell me afterwards that I didn't want to work with Jason. I wanted to talk to you, and I felt out of the loop. So I think having a transaction coordinator has kind of taken away that need to have an EA, and our business has boomed since I let Jason
Yeah.
go.
I was gonna say, I
Because
completely agree with this
I-
model that you're talking about.
Because I got more involved again instead of, and I kind of I thought I needed Jason, but then I realized that he kept giving me the job back. And I was like,
Well, there's two things here. When you get an EA to run your team, when you hire an EA, you have to take the time to actually train them to the way that you would operate your brand first, which agents,
executive
executive
assistant.
assistant. So let's say, let's use Ashley as an example, right? When we hired Ashley, we hired her with an executive assistant to the leadership team. No job description, except I took the technology director, agent service coordinator, executive assistant, assistant team leader, assistant MCA. And Jillian and I highlighted all the things that we felt would be a great need if we could find one person to just do these highlighted needs.
Yeah.
Now, from that, Ashley has experienced for over 120 days. Once we have this conversation at the end of the month, going into the second part of the year, Ashley will now have 4 months where we're like, okay, so where do you excel, what's natural for you and what's not, to build her job description, which is completely against the model, because they'll tell you to get a showing assistant first, to do this, do that. And for me, I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna actually follow that right now. I'm gonna go a little rogue, and I'm gonna say, find the talent, and then figure out where the talent lies within your team. So Jason might have had talent, but if somebody's hiring Janet Faulkner, unfortunately, they want Janet Faulkner.
Yeah, they want to talk.
They want you. And
Yeah.
so taking that transaction person and setting the expectation and saying, so listen, I am personally going to list your property. I am going to work with you, and Heidi is my buyer specialist. So Heidi's actually gonna be taking you around to go see the homes. Once you're ready to write the offer, I will be in communication with Heidi to ensure that we write the strongest offer. During the negotiations, I will work with Heidi on taking over to make sure that we negotiate in terms of your best interest. Once they realize that you're just in it a little bit, they feel much better for you to build that bigger brand than if you're, in my opinion, again, this is completely kind of against our what we teach our agents.
Right.
But I think Gary's seeing this too. You're the rainmaker, you're the person, and everyone's responsible, but I'm always in on the responsibility of everybody. So I have to be like, okay, where are we with this buyer? Where are we with the seller? Where are we with this? You're my list agent. Where are we with this? Where are we with that? I have to still be that face and name. So Ashley does all this great stuff, But if I didn't touch base with Ashley and say, hey, where are we with this? Where are we with that? If she wasn't so great at being like, hey, by the way, we need this for Mitchell, we da. I still have to be involved. I still have to reach out to Mitchell. Hey, Mitchell, thanks so much for getting back to Ashley about when you want to teach fair housing.
Yeah.
But one would say, yeah, but you pay your executive assistant to do that. It's like, no, I do, but it's on me.
Yeah.
And I still need that business, because if Jason left,
Yeah.
or if this person left, or if Ashley left, I can't let them fall in love with Ashley. If they fall in love with Ashley, oh no, and that's what the problem with, like, again, being a team leader. If the agents fall in love with their broker or their team leader and they leave, that gives everybody the opportunity, like, you know what, actually, I was unhappy.
Where are
too.
we
I'm
going,
leaving.
Jamie?
Where are we
all
going?
going?
And seriously, that's what happens. It happened in Beverly, and it happens. And so then you want to make sure that it's the brand. It's the value, it's the brand, it's a team. It's again, setting expectations and that whole thing, which is really hard. It's like, it's hard to do all that.
Yeah.
Oh, I
That's
stopped
people
with
too, yeah, that's one reason why I don't wanna.
No, I
never
did.
wanna have to team leader. That's number one, I don't wanna deal with
And then don't work in my
organizing
slot,
everybody,
but
I can't, I don't wanna be the boss or anything, and
But,
I feel
Oh,
like
okay.
I spend so much time trying to build the relationships that if I don't, I feel like if